Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are still working through A Cricket in Times Square. Uh, Today we have chapters 12 and 13 to read. We are coming to the end, so we will create a poll as to which book you want to hear next. Look for that to go up probably tonight once I go through my stock of books. So, all right, let's get down to it. Chapters 12 and 13. Chapter 12, Mr. Smedley. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Chester Cricket's new manager, Tucker Mouse, was pacing up and down in front of the cricket cage. Harry Cat was lying on the shelf with his tail drooping over the edge, and Chester himself was relaxing in the matchbox. "I have been giving the new situation my serious consideration," said Tucker Mouse solemnly. "As a matter of fact, I couldn't think of anything else at all day. The first thing to understand is Chester Cricket is a very talented person." "Hear, hear," said Harry. Chester smiled at him. He was really an awfully nice person, Harry Cat. "The second thing is, talent is something rare and beautiful and precious, and it must not be allowed to go to waste." Tucker cleared his throat. "And the third thing is, there might be, who could tell, a little money in it, maybe." "I knew that was at the bottom of this," said Harry. "Now wait, please, Harry, please. Just listen a minute before you start calling me a greedy rodent," said Tucker. He sat down beside Chester and Harry. "The newsstand is doing lousy business, right? Right. If the Bellinis were happy, Mama Bellini wouldn't always be wanting to get rid of him, right? Right. She likes him today because he played her favorite songs, but who can tell how she might feel about him tomorrow? And I'd also like to help them because they've been so good to me," put in Chester Cricket. "But naturally," said Tucker. "And if a little bit of the rewards of success should happen to find its way into a drain pipe where lives an old and trusted friend of Chester, well, who could be the worse for that?" "I still don't see how this means we can make money," said Chester. "I haven't worked out the details," said Tucker, "but I can tell you this. New York is a place where people are willing to pay for talent. So what's clear is Chester has got to learn more music. I personally prefer his own compositions. No offense, Chester." "Oh, no," said the Cricket. I do myself." "But the human beings," Tucker went on, "being what human beings are, and who can blame them, would rather hear pieces written by themselves." "But how am I going to learn new songs?" asked Chester. Easy as pie," said Tucker Mouse. He darted over to the radio, leaned all his weight on one of the dials, and snapped it on. "Not too loud," said Harry Cat. "The people outside will get suspicious." Tucker twisted the dial until a soft, steady stream of music was coming out. "Just play it by ear," he said to Chester. That was the beginning of Chester Cricket's formal music education. On the night of the party, he had just been playing for fun, but now he seriously set out to learn some human music. Before the night was over, he had memorized 3 movements from different symphonies, half a dozen songs from musical comedies, the solo part of a violin concerto, and 4 hymns, which he picked up from a late religious service. The next morning, which was the last Sunday in August, all 3 Bellinis came to open the newsstand. They could hardly believe what had happened yesterday, and were anxious to see if Chester would continue to sing familiar songs. Mario gave the cricket his usual breakfast of mulberry leaves and water, which Chester took his time in eating. He could see that everyone was very nervous, and he sort of enjoyed making them wait. When breakfast was over, he had a good stretch and limbered his wings. Since it was a Sunday, Chester thought it would be nice to start with a hymn. So he chose to open his concert with Rock of Ages. At the sound of the first notes, the faces of Mama, Papa, and Mario broke into smiles. They looked at each other, and their eyes told how happy they were, but they didn't dare speak a word. Rock of Ages, Mr. Smedley came up to the newsstand to buy his monthly copy of Musical America. His umbrella, neatly folded, was hanging over his arm as usual. "Hey, Mr. Smedley, my cricket plays hymns," Mario blurted out, even before the music teacher had a chance to say good morning. "And opera," said Papa. "And Italian songs," said Mama. "Well, well, well," said Mr. Smedley, who didn't believe a word, of course. "I see we've all become very fond of our cricket, but aren't we letting our imaginations run away with us just a bit?" "Oh, no," said Mario. "Just listen. He'll do it again." Chester took a sip of water and was ready to play some more. This time, however, instead of Rock of Ages, he launched into a stirring performance of Onward Christian Soldiers. Mr. Smedley's eyes popped. His mouth hung open, and the color drained from his face. "Do you want to sit down, Mr. Smedley?" asked Papa. "You look a little pale." "I think perhaps I'd better," said Mr. Smedley, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "It's rather a shock, you know." He came inside the newsstand and sat on the stool so that his face was just a few inches away from the cricket cage. Chester chirped the second verse of Onward Christian Soldiers and finished with a soaring amen. "Why, the organist played that in church this morning," exclaimed the music teacher breathlessly, "and it didn't sound half as good. Of course, the cricket isn't as loud as an organ, but what he lacks in volume, he makes up for in sweetness." "That was nothing," said Papa Bellini proudly. "You should hear him play Aida." "May I try an experiment?" asked Mr. Smedley. All three Bellini said yes at once. The music teacher whistled the scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Chester flexed his legs, and as quickly as you could run your fingers up the string of a harp, he played the whole scale. Mr. Smedley took off his glasses. His eyes were moist. "He has absolute pitch," he said in a shaky voice. "I have only met one other person who did. She was a soprano named Arabella Heffelfinger." Chester started to play again. He went through the two other hymns that he had learned, the Rosary and A Mighty Fortress is Our God, and then the violin concerto. Naturally, he couldn't play it just as it was written without a full orchestra to back him, but he was magnificent, all things considered. Once Mr. Smedley got used to the idea that he was listening to a concert given by a cricket. He enjoyed the performance very much. He had special praise for Chester's phrasing, by which he meant the neat way the cricket played all the notes of a passage without letting them slide together. And sometimes, when he had been deeply moved by a section, the music teacher would touch his chest over his heart and say, "That cricket has it here." As Chester chirped his way through the program, a crowd collected around the newsstand. After each piece, The people applauded and congratulated the Bellinis on their remarkable cricket. Mama and Papa were fit to burst with pride. Mario was very happy too, but of course he had thought all summer that Chester was a very unusual person. When the playing was over, Mr. Smedley stood up and shook hands with Papa, Mama, and Mario. "I want to thank you for the most delightful hour I have ever spent," he said. "The whole world should know of this cricket." A light suddenly spread over his face. "Why, I believe I shall write a letter to the musical editor of the New York Times," he said. "They'd certainly be interested." And this is the letter that Mr. Smedley wrote. "To the music editor of the New York Times and to the people of New York City. Rejoice, New Yorkers, rejoice, for a musical miracle has come to pass in our city. This very day, Sunday, August 28th, surely a day which will go down in music history, it was my pleasure and privilege to be present at the most beautiful recital ever heard in a lifetime devoted to the sublime art. Music, that is. Being a musicologist myself, and having graduated with honors from a well-known local school of music, I feel I am qualified to judge such matters, and I say without hesitation that never have such strains been heard in New York before. But who is this artist? The eager music lover will ask. Was it perchance some new singer, just lately arrived from a triumphant tour of the capitals of Europe? No, music lovers, it was not. Then was it some violinist who pressed his cheek with love against his darling violin as he played? Wrong again, music lovers. Could it have been a pianist with sensitive long fingers that drew magic sounds from the shining ivory keys? Ah, music lovers, you will never guess. It was a cricket. A simple cricket, no longer than half my little finger, which is rather long because I do play piano, but a cricket that is able to chirp operatic, symphonic, and popular music. Am I wrong, then, in describing such an event as a miracle? And where is this extraordinary performer? Well, not at Carnegie Hall, music lovers, nor in the Metropolitan Opera House. You will find him in the newsstand run by the Bellini in the subway station at Times Square. I urge, I implore every man, woman, and child who has music in his soul not to miss one of these illustrious, nay, these glorious concerts. Enchantedly yours, Horatio P. Smedley. P.S. I also give piano lessons. Chapter 13. Fame. The music editor of the New York Times was quite surprised to get Mr. Smedley's letter, but he believed in the freedom of the press and had it printed in the theatrical and musical page of the paper. The next morning, thousands of people, at home, over the breakfast table, and on buses and trains coming into New York City, read about Chester. The Bellinis got to the newsstand very early. Papa opened the Times bundle and thumbed through a copy looking for the letter. When he found it, he read it aloud to Mama and Mario. Then he folded the paper and put it back on the stack to be sold. So, said Papa, we have a celebrity in our midst. The celebrity at the moment was having himself a big yawn in the cricket cage. He had been up most of the night with his manager and Harry Cat, learning new pieces. After eating breakfast and having another stretch, he tested his wings against each other, like a violinist making sure that his violin was in tune. The wings were fine. This time of year, they almost itched to chirp. Chester ran over the scales a few times and started to play. His first selection was something he had heard the night before called A Little Night Music. It was by a man named Mozart. Chester and Tucker and Harry had all been delighted by A Little Night Music. They thought it was a very good piece for the cricket to learn because they had first heard it at night, and also because Chester was quite a little person himself. It was lovely music, too, and with little tunes that sounded like insects hopping around and having a grand time. As Chester played, the station began to fill up with the usual commuters. People collected around the newsstand, some drawn by the chirping, and others because they wanted to see the cricket they'd read about. And, as always in New York, when a little crowd formed, more people came just to see what the others were looking at. Bees do that, and so do human beings. Somebody asked who was playing. A cricket, the one man answered. Stop joking, said the first man, and burst out laughing. In front of him was a little lady with a feather in her hat, who was enjoying the music. She turned around and whispered, "Shh," very angrily. In another part of the station, a man was reading Mr. Smedley's letter, and two men were also reading it over his shoulders. "My gosh," said the one on the right, "a cricket. Who would have believed it?" "It's a fake," said the man on the left. "Probably a record." The man in the middle, who owned the paper, said, "It isn't a fake. It's a little living creature, and it sings beautifully. I'm going to give up my ticket to the Philharmonic." Everywhere people were talking and arguing and listening to Chester. Mario made a pile of old magazines and put the cricket cage on top of them so everyone could see better and hear more clearly. When Chester finished one number, a shout of "More! More!" rang through the station. The cricket would catch his breath, have a sip of water, flex his wings, and begin a new selection as fast as he could. And the crowd grew and grew. Mama Bellini had never seen such a crowd around the newsstand. But she wasn't one to be dazed by good fortune. Taking a bundle of Times under one arm, she worked her way around, murmuring softly so as not to disturb the music lovers. "Read about the cricket. Read about the cricket. It's in the New York Times." People snapped the papers up like candy. Mama had to keep going back to the newsstand for new loads. And in less than half an hour, the whole stock of the New York Times had been sold. "Don't just sit there with your eyes shut," Mama whispered to Papa. Papa Bellini was one of those people who enjoy listening to music most with their eyes closed. She put a bunch of Musical America into his arms. "Try these. It's a good time now." Papa sighed, but he did what she asked him. And in a little while, all the copies of Musical America were gone. It was safe to say there had never been such an interest in music in the Times Square subway station as there was on that morning. Over in the drive, Tucker Mouse and Harry Cat were listening too. Harry with his eyes closed like Papa Bellini. There were so many human beings that they couldn't even see the newsstand, but they could hear Chester chirping away on the other side of all the heads and legs and backs. His clear notes filled the station. "Didn't I tell you?" said Tucker between pieces. "Look at 'em all. There's a fortune in this. I wish one of us was big enough to pass the hat." But Harry only smiled. He was happy right where he was, just sitting, enjoying the music. And the crowd kept growing. That first day alone, there were 783 people late to work because they stopped to listen to Chester. During the next few days, other papers besides the Times began to run articles on the cricket. Even Musical America sent an assistant editor, down to hear the recital. And Chester was news on the radio and on television. All the announcers were talking about the remarkable insect who was delighting throngs in the Times Square subway station. The Bellinis decided that the best times for Chester to play were early in the morning and late in the afternoon, since that was when the station was fullest. Concerts began at 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. and usually lasted about an hour and a half, not including encores. Business boomed at the newsstand. Mama made sure that extra loads of magazines and newspapers were delivered. But even so, by closing time, they had sold out completely. Mama Bellini, by the way, turned out to be the best friend cricket ever had. At noon, she would rush home and fix Chester some delicacy for lunch, like a teeny-weeny fruit salad or an entire vegetable dinner so small you could serve it on a silver dollar. Chester really preferred his mulberry leaves, but he ate everything so as not to hurt her feelings. Sai Fong, who had seen Chester's picture in the paper, kept Mario supplied with leaves. He and his Chinese gentleman friend dug out 2 collapsible chairs from his attic and came uptown every day at 8 and 4:30 to hear Chester's new programs. Mr. Smedley was there at least once a day, too. He brought a tape recorder and made recordings of all the new pieces Chester learned. And during the intermissions, there was always an intermission of 10 minutes halfway through the concert, he delivered short talks on musical appreciation to the audiences. So by Thursday, Chester Cricket was the most famous musician in New York City. But now here is a strange thing. He wasn't really happy. Not the way he used to be. Life didn't seem to have the fun and freedom it had before. For one thing, although he thought that glory was very nice, Chester found that it could make you tired. 2 concerts a day, every day, was an exhausting program, and he wasn't used to playing on a schedule. Back home in the meadow, if the sun felt nice, or the moon was full, or he wanted to have a musical conversation with his friend the lark, he would chirp because the mood was on him. But here he had to begin performing at 8 and 4:30, whether he felt like it or not. Of course, he was very glad to be helping the Bellinis, but a lot of joy was gone from his playing. And there was something else. Chester didn't like being looked at. It wasn't so bad while he was playing. Everyone was quiet, enjoying the music. But after the performance was over, the human beings crowded around and put their faces close to the bars and poked their fingers through. Souvenir hunters had taken his paper cup and even the pieces of mulberry leaves that were left over. Chester knew they didn't mean any harm, but he couldn't get used to the idea that millions of eyes were staring at him. It got so bad that when the concerts were over, he took to crawling into the matchbox and putting a piece of Kleenex up to block the entrance. Then, on Thursday, 3 things happened. 3 things that upset him very much. The first was September. It was the first day of a new month. Chester happened to glance up at a copy of the Times, where the date was, and there he saw it, September 1st, a new month, and a new season, too. Autumn was almost upon them. For some reason, the thought of September, with all its changes, made Chester feel very small and lost. That evening, while he was playing, an orange leaf the first to fall, blew into the station and landed right next to the cricket cage. Now, this leaf had come from New Jersey. A playful gust of wind danced it over the Hudson River and up 42nd Street and whisked it down the subway entrance. Chester was in the middle of a song when the leaf came down. It was such a shock to see this little reminder of all that was happening in the country that for a moment he couldn't continue. But then he realized where he was and forced himself to go on. Mario was the only one who noticed a break in the playing. But the worst thing happened after the concert was over. Chester was leaning up against the matchbox when suddenly 2 fingers began to work their way through the bars of the cage toward the little silver bell. They weren't Mama's fingers, or Papa's, or Mario's. Chester knew the hands of all the Bellinis. Someone was trying to steal the bell. The cricket chirped in alarm just as the man was about to pull it down. Papa turned around, saw what was happening, and shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" The man disappeared into the crowd. Mama and Mario had been outside selling off the last of the day's papers. They came running back to the newsstand. "What is it?" panted Mama. "A thief," said Papa. "Is my cricket all right?" asked Mario anxiously. "Yes," said Papa. "He's in the matchbox." Mario picked up the box and looked in. There was Chester piling a Kleenex against the opening. "You can come out now," the boy said. "It's safe." But Chester wouldn't come out. Mario had noticed that the cricket took to hiding after each recital. It worried him. Mama Bellini was convinced that the man was a kidnapper, or rather a cricket napper, not just a thief. But Papa told them how he had been going straight for the bell. "That bell belongs to my cricket," said Mario. "Mr. Fong gave it to him." He unfastened the bell and put it way back in the cash register drawer, next to Mama's earring, so that it wouldn't tempt anyone. Chester was still hiding in the matchbox. Mario gently pulled the Kleenex away and whispered, "Please come out." Chester stirred and chirped, but stayed where he was. "What's the matter with him?" said Papa. "I think he may be sick," said Mario. He coaxed Chester with a mulberry leaf. The cricket poked his head up out of the matchbox. When he saw that the crowd had broken up, he jumped into the palm of Mario's hand. "You should take him to the bug doctor," said Mama. "What do you call them?" "Entomologists," said Mario, holding the leaf for Chester to nibble. "Take him to an entomologist," said Mama. "He might just be tired," said Papa. "We could give him a rest for a few days." Chester had eaten as much of the leaf as he wanted. He gave a short chirp for thank you and jumped back into the box. "He isn't happy anymore," said Mario. "How do you know?" said Mama. "I can tell," said Mario. "I know how I'd feel if I was a cricket." Mario put the matchbox in the cricket cage. "Next week school begins," he said. "You've got to promise you'll take good care of him while I'm not here." "We will, Mario," said Papa. "We like him too, you know." The boy stood looking down at the cage. His forehead was drawn together in a worried frown. "I almost wish he hadn't come to New York if he isn't going to be happy here," he said finally. Chester heard him and thought about what he said. He thought about it while the Bellinis were fitting the cover onto the newsstand. And later, in the darkness, after they'd gone home, he was still thinking about it. Then quickly, like a lock snapping into place, something was decided in his mind. Chester felt very relieved after the decision had been made. He sighed, and his wings and his legs all relaxed as he waited for Tucker Mouse. that's it for today. We will actually finish the book tomorrow. So tonight I'm going to put up a poll here on the Leaves page, and you can tell me which book you want me to read next. So thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you all tomorrow at 2. Thanks. Bye.